We strongly encourage other nations whose economies depend on the Strait far more than ours. We get less than 1% of our oil from the Strait, and some countries get much more. Japan gets 95%, China gets 90%, many of the Europeans get quite a bit, South Korea gets 35%, so we want them to come and help us with the Strait.
This is a war of choice by President Trump and the United States. We are going to continue our self-defense.
Tehran has all but halted maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, a vital waterway that handles about 20% of the world's crude oil and liquefied natural gas.
Right now, the Strait of Hormuz is no longer just a risk, it's actively disrupted. After recent U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran, Tehran responded by restricting and effectively closing parts of the strait, warning that hostile ships would be targeted.
Iran is beginning to lay mines in the Strait of Hormuz.
Since then, multiple vessels have been attacked, and shipping traffic has dropped sharply. This matters because nearly 20% of the world's oil flows through this narrow route. Now, with the crisis escalating, oil prices have surged past $100 per barrel. Insurance costs have jumped, and even hundreds of cargo ships are being delayed or blocked.
You will not be able to keep oil and energy prices artificially low through economic life support. As we have already warned, if the war spreads across the region, expect oil to reach $200 per barrel. Oil prices follow the level of security in the region, and the source of that insecurity is you.
The United States is trying to respond quickly. President Donald Trump has asked multiple countries to send naval ships and escort tankers to reopen the strait, hoping to build a coalition to secure global energy flows.
Demanding that these countries come in and protect their own territory because it is their territory. It's the place from which they get their energy. And they should come and they should help us protect it.
But here's the problem. Most countries are hesitant. Several allies, including key Asian and European partners, have either refused or delayed sending ships, exposing serious limits in coalition response. And that's exactly where the Philippines comes in. When asked if Manila could help escort ships, Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro Jr. gave a direct answer. The Philippines does not have the capability to operate in a place like Hormuz. And that one statement explains the bigger story. This crisis isn't just about Iran or oil anymore, it's about the real limits of global alliances. The real turning point came from Manila. On March 17, 2026, as the Strait of Hormuz crisis escalated and the U.S. pushed allies to send naval ships, Philippine Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro Jr. gave a clear and direct response. We don't have the capability to escort. Moot and academic. No diplomacy. No hesitation. Just reality. This came at a time when President Donald Trump was actively calling on countries, especially those dependent on Middle Eastern oil, to help reopen and secure the strait after Iran's actions disrupted global shipping and sent oil prices sharply higher. But Teodoro's statement cut through the global pressure. He made it clear that the Philippines, despite being a U.S. treaty ally, simply cannot operate in a distant, high-risk theater like Hormuz. This wasn't a political refusal or lack of support. It was a capability gap. At the same time, Manila's focus remained elsewhere, protecting Filipino workers in the Middle East, preparing for rising fuel and fertilizer costs, managing the economic impact of the crisis at home. So while Washington was thinking in terms of global coalition building, Manila was thinking in terms of practical limits and immediate priorities. To understand why Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro Jr. said the Philippines cannot escort ships in Hormuz, you have to look at how its military is actually built. The armed forces of the Philippines is designed for nearby defense, not long-distance operations. With around 125,000 personnel, its main focus is clear: protect the homeland, manage internal threats, and secure areas like the South China Sea, where tensions with China are constant. That focus shapes everything. The Navy has improved in recent years, with ships like the Jose Rizal-class frigates, but these are built for regional patrols, not long missions in places like the Middle East. The Philippines simply does not have a blue water navy that can stay and operate far from home for long periods. Then comes the bigger issue: logistics. Sending ships to Hormuz isn't just about sailing there. It requires long-range fuel and supply chains, maintenance support far from home, coordination with other navies, continuous operational presence. The Philippines does not have this kind of system. No overseas bases, no large support fleet, and no infrastructure for sustained operations thousands of kilometers away. Air power is also limited in this context. While the country now operates FA-50 jets, these are light fighters meant for local defense. They are not designed for distant deployments or extended missions in a high-risk zone like the Gulf. And then there's the bigger picture. Right now, as the Hormuz crisis pushes oil prices higher and global tensions rise, Manila is dealing with its own priorities. Watching developments in the South China Sea, preparing for economic shocks from rising fuel prices, ensuring the safety of Filipino workers in the Middle East. So when Teodoro said the Philippines cannot deploy, it wasn't downplaying the military. It was stating a simple reality. The Philippines is built to defend its region, not to operate in global conflict zones like the Strait of Hormuz. What Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro Jr. said also comes down to one simple factor: geography. The Philippines sits right on the front line of the South China Sea, where tensions with China are ongoing. Almost daily, there are patrols, standoffs, and pressure on Philippine vessels. Just to the north is the Luzon Strait, another sensitive area linked to Taiwan and wider US-China competition. This is where Manila's military attention is locked in. Now compare that to the Strait of Hormuz. It's more than 7,000 kilometers away, in a completely different region with different risks and actors. Sending forces there would mean pulling attention and resources away from areas where the Philippines is already under pressure. And right now, with the Hormuz crisis escalating after US, Israel strikes on Iran, Manila's priorities are even clearer. Instead of deploying forces, the government is focused on monitoring rising oil prices and economic impact, preparing for fuel and supply shocks at home, ensuring the safety of over 1 million Filipino workers in the Middle East. So, when Teodoro ruled out sending ships, it wasn't just about military limits, it was about strategic focus. The Philippines is choosing to stay concentrated on its own region, where its security challenges are immediate and constant. Because at the end of the day, its priority is simple: defend its waters, protect its people, and avoid stretching itself too far. Even without sending a single ship, the Philippines is already feeling the impact of the Hormuz crisis. As Iran disrupts traffic in the Strait following US, Israel strikes, global oil supply has tightened. Prices have jumped sharply, shipping costs are rising, and energy markets are under stress. For a country like the Philippines, which depends heavily on imported oil, this hits fast. Fuel prices go up, transportation becomes more expensive, and the biggest pressure shows up in agriculture, where higher fuel costs increase the price of fertilizers, irrigation, and food production. This is exactly what Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro Jr. warned about. Even as he ruled out sending naval ships, he pointed to the real risk at home: rising costs for farmers, inflation, and economic strain. And it doesn't stop at oil. As security risks grow in Hormuz, shipping companies are charging higher insurance, some routes are slowing down, and supply chains are getting disrupted. That means higher prices on imports, not just energy. So while the Philippines cannot take part in military operations in the Gulf, it cannot avoid the consequences either. That's the reality Teodoro was highlighting. The Philippines may not operate in Hormuz, but what happens in Hormuz directly affects the Philippines. The Hormuz crisis and Teodoro's statement reveals something important about how U.S. alliances actually work. In theory, American strategy depends on burden sharing. Allies are expected to step in, share responsibilities, and help manage global crises like this one. But in reality, not all allies can do that. The Philippines is a clear example. It is a treaty ally, hosts U.S. forces, and plays a key role in the Indo-Pacific. But as Teodoro made clear, it cannot operate in a distant conflict zone like Hormuz. Its role stops at its regional limits. And this exposes a pattern. What we're seeing is a kind of two-level alliance system. Regional partners like the Philippines focused on defending their own area. Global capable allies like the US, UK, Japan, and Australia able to deploy far and sustain operations. Right now, as the US tries to build a coalition to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the burden is falling mostly on this second group. Many countries are either hesitant or simply not capable of sending ships into a high-risk zone. That creates a challenge for Washington. It means expectations from allies have to be more realistic, more pressure on a smaller group of capable partners, greater reliance on US forces to handle critical choke points. So, in practice, this isn't a fully shared global effort. It's a system where only a few countries can actually act. And Teodoro's statement made that reality clear. The gap highlighted by Teodoro's statement doesn't go unnoticed, and for rivals, it creates opportunity. For Iran, this is already visible. By disrupting traffic in the Strait of Hormuz through drones, missiles, and threats to shipping, Tehran is testing how far it can push before a strong, coordinated response comes. If fewer countries step in, it gives Iran more room to control the situation.
When we talk about the Strait of Hormuz, which is such an important transit point for global trade, you have said it is closed to Israel and it's closed to the United States. The Financial Times is reporting that European diplomats from France and Italy are talking to your government about trying to get safe passage for their ships. Are you open to restarting oil and gas vessels going through there?
Well, we are open to countries who want to talk to us about the safe passage of their vessels.
You are negotiating with France and Italy?
I cannot mention any country in particular, but we have been approached by a number of countries who want to have a safe passage for their vessels, and this is up to our military to decide. And they have already decided to let a group of vessels belongs to different countries to pass in a safe and secure. So we provide them security to pass because we have not closed this strait. They are not coming themselves because of the insecurity which is there because of the aggression by the US.
China is watching closely. It depends heavily on oil flowing through Hormuz, so stability matters. But at the same time, Beijing is observing how US alliances actually perform under pressure. When allies like the Philippines admit they cannot contribute, it reveals the real limits of coalition strength. Russia, meanwhile, gains indirectly. Rising tensions are pushing oil prices higher, which benefits energy exporters. At the same time, the crisis pulls Western attention toward the Middle East, easing pressure in other regions. The pattern is simple. When not all allies can act, the response becomes uneven. And when the response is uneven, it creates space for risk-taking. That's the bigger takeaway from this moment. What looks like a strong global alliance on paper can become much more limited in practice, and actors like Iran, China, and Russia are quick to test those limits. This entire episode, especially Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro Jr.'s statement, highlights a simple but important truth. Being an ally does not mean having the capability to act. The Philippines is a U.S. treaty ally, closely aligned in the Indo-Pacific. But when the Hormuz crisis escalated after U.S., Israel strikes on Iran, and Washington asked partners to help reopen the strait, Manila made its position clear: it cannot operate in a distant, high-risk environment like the Gulf. That's not about politics, it's about capability. In real crises, what matters is not agreements on paper, but what countries can actually do. Deploying ships to Hormuz requires long-range naval power, strong logistics, and the ability to sustain operations under threat. Only a few countries have that kind of capacity. This is where the difference becomes clear. Some allies offer political and regional support, while others can carry out global missions. For the United States, this means expectations have to be more realistic. Not every partner can contribute in every situation. As seen in the current crisis, the burden of securing key routes like Hormuz falls on a smaller group of capable nations. For the Philippines, the lesson is more practical. Teodoro's statement reflects a decision to stay focused on immediate priorities, managing the economic impact of rising oil prices, protecting Filipino workers in the Middle East, and maintaining security in the South China Sea. At the same time, it highlights areas that need long-term improvement, especially logistics, energy security, and maritime capability.
In our estimation, if there are going to be sustained, persistent disruptions to energy facilities in the region, the Strait of Hormuz, that could actually lead oil prices to top $100. We estimate reaching up to $108 a barrel.
Looking ahead, the Hormuz crisis and Defense Secretary Teodoro's statement points to a clear shift in how global security will be managed. The United States is likely to rely even more on a smaller group of allies that can actually operate far from home. Countries like Japan, Australia, and key European partners will play a bigger role in securing critical routes like Hormuz, especially as Washington pushes to keep global energy flows open after Iran's disruption. At the same time, Southeast Asian countries, including the Philippines, will stay focused on their own region. As Teodoro made clear, Manila's priorities are closer to home, managing tensions in the South China Sea, handling the economic impact of rising oil prices, and protecting Filipino workers in the Middle East. That focus is unlikely to change. What will change is how countries prepare for shocks like this. The recent spike in oil prices and disruption in shipping will push governments to invest more in energy security, stronger supply chains, and better fuel reserves. At the same time, there will be steady efforts to modernize militaries, especially in naval and air capabilities, so countries can better protect their own waters.